to my podcast on real relationships. My name is Sophie Passon, and I am a relationship expert, international speaker, and best-selling author of the book The Other Half. I decided to start this podcast because, in my opinion, relationships are currently not being portrayed as what they really are. Whether you're watching TV or just the news on social media, the perception given to people is actually wrong. And my aim is actually to talk about what happens in the real world, talk about real stories, and listen to what real people think, do, or go through, as opposed to creating expectations of things that don't really exist. I may not agree with everything that is said by my guests, but it is their chance to express their opinions and their stories. And today we are going to talk about someone who has an older partner, Fiona. Hi, Fiona.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me.
That's all right. So can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Fiona. I'm 41 years old and I run my own company. And my partner, who I'm not married to, is coming up for 60. So there's an 18-year age gap. And I don't have a problem with this at all. And I love the fact that you wanted to hear from people in terms of their kind of like real life stories about people's perceptions, and it's just actually really good to be able to tell you what it's really like.
Yeah, thank you. And that's exactly that's the idea. So how long ago did you meet him?
We met several years ago, so we've been together a reasonable length of time, but we were both, you know, like I was well grown up by the time I met him. Yeah. So we've been together some time.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. And at the time, did the age difference worry you?
It didn't worry me. Funny enough, it worried him a little bit more right in the beginning. And the way he explained it to me later was that as things went on in our relationship, he got just really comfortable with the fact that, you know, I wasn't going anywhere, that it was obviously a long-term relationship. Mm-hmm. But I think in the beginning, he sort of, I think maybe, I don't know whether it was an insecurity or something, but I think at the beginning he didn't feel like completely secure in our relationship in terms of, you know, would I want someone younger, you know, was it okay kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But I guess as things go on and you do develop that kind of deeper relationship, and I suppose I think I remember him explaining it to me that, well, you know, I didn't go anywhere, and there was a point at which he obviously just felt very confident in our relationship, and that issue was no longer an issue.
Okay,
but enough. It's interesting that it's never been an issue for me.
Yeah, and I found, because I was talking to someone just yesterday, it was a gay couple, and the younger one was 38, the eldest one was 61.
Yeah.
And the young one didn't have a problem with it at all, but the eldest was more like, I'm actually a bit worried because I feel like I might be a burden when I'm 80, sort of thing.
Mm,
which
yes.
The young person did not, you know, well, 38, yeah. 38 is obviously very young, but, you know, did not have a problem with and didn't see that as an issue at all. So it's interesting how different perceptions.
Yes, and I think you're right that your relationship does go through different stages. So I think it's not just a case of, well, I mean, you're two people in a relationship having that experience together, but at the same time, you're both growing, you're both entering different times in your life, having different experiences, and I think that can change. So I think even if you go into a relationship and there's no issue, or there's one issue, that issue might go away, another one might pop up. So I think obviously you're building a relationship together and you go through those things together. And I know certainly for my partner, his parents are a lot older than mine, and he, you know, he's got some, you know, caring responsibilities now, and also he's seeing his parents age. And, you know, there's things like dementia to deal with, which I know a lot of people are dealing with aging parents. And I think sometimes he does think about that more so than he ever used to. And I just think that's a natural thing.
Yeah. And I think I can get it, I suppose, because if you are both the same sort of age, you'd be going through roughly, I mean, when I say the same sort of age, let's say a 5-8 year gap, you're still going to get through it roughly at the same time.
Exactly.
Where you've got a bigger gap, indeed, it's going to be, and it's something that I guess you have to accept yourself, because it means that person, in essence, could be gone by the time you are 60. And then you have your retirement age on your own, or not necessarily, but you know what I mean, without that person in your life.
Yes, definitely. And that is something that that I do think about from time to time. I do think about that. My take on it is that even though that is a potential reality, I always say to myself, well, I don't have any guarantee. No. I don't know how long my life will be. I don't know how long his life will be. I don't know what we're going to experience together as a couple. And equally in my life or in his life, we don't know whether we're going to in the future be together or apart. Anything really. So I think to myself, I think of all the possible worst case scenarios, that I may be lonely, that I may be on my own, that my life may change and I don't like it. Well, ultimately, would that change whether I wanted to be with him or not?
I was just about to say,
right now in this moment, I want to be with him.
If you love someone, it doesn't matter, as it were, how long it's for. You want to spend the maximum amount of time that you can with them.
Exactly. And I wish, and obviously I wish I'd met him sooner. I wish he'd been younger and potentially had more time together. But then you just can't. You can't change anything. And none of us know how long we've got, do we?
Yeah. So in terms of obviously having an older partner must have some perks, but also some challenges. So what about children, for instance?
Okay, so children was an interesting one. So he has 2 grown-up children, and I have not got children. And there was a point at which I think quite early on in our relationship, he said to me that he didn't want to have any more children. And at that point, because of course things can change over time, and I thought to myself, well, actually, I'm okay with that. And I was okay with that then. So I was okay with that 10 years ago. I'm okay with that now, but I didn't know if I was by the time I got to 41.
Yeah.
I didn't know whether things might have changed, and I might change my mind later. So I think that was something that I was okay with that as it was. And my take on it, I suppose, is that if I'm going to bring children into the world, I don't want to bring children into the world with somebody who has been explicit about not wanting children. However, I've also been really honest with him in that if it did actually happen, then I would be, if I've taken all the precautions and it still happened, from absolute day one of finding out I'm pregnant, that is a baby, and that is a baby that I would be committed to having. And so, and that's just very much a personal thing. Like, everybody is entitled to their own opinions, but for me, that I was very clear on. So yeah, I think it did make me really think about that in terms of what I wanted, and that has been something that's popped up from time to time. Hasn't been a really big issue, and hasn't been the issue that I thought it would be, thought it might be. And as I get older, obviously, now other women talk to me about that. I work with women who are in business for themselves, and so that can come up because they're focused on their business and growing their business, and their business is almost like their baby, and they've chosen to not have children for that reason, or aren't, and people are asking, when are you going to have children? And
sometimes with certain ages, unless it's something, because some people have got it in them from very young that they just want to have kids, and that's fine. But some people don't really, especially I suppose nowadays, they don't really think about it. They just go through life, and then one day, oh, you're 30, oh, shall I? Yeah, I might need to start thinking about that. But a lot of people wouldn't necessarily think about it to start off with. probably
Yeah,
study longer. You know, we kind of go a bit, I'm not going to say delayed, but if you go back 50 years, in your 20s, you were likely to be married.
it
And
was expected.
where now it's probably more in your 30s. So I
Yeah.
suppose that the question raises itself a bit later on in life anyway.
Yes. Yeah, I think you're right.
And what about mindset? Because obviously, you know, when you two different ages, and you could even argue two different generations to a degree, mindset might be different for certain things. So how have you found that?
Really not found that at all.
Okay.
I think actually, when I think about in terms of like what even attracted me to him in the first place, and just the fact that he's just got such a phenomenal personality, and our values are very similar. So and we like a lot of the same things, and you know, and yet at the same time we're both very independent and very secure in ourselves. And I think those things are the things that bond you together.
Yeah.
And I think so. It might seem like it could be an issue that, you know, people be into different things, and sometimes people talk about memories, like recollections of different things, like, and ultimately, like, how important is that in a relationship, that you can reminisce with them about, I don't know, TV programs you watched when you were a kid, or experiences you had. Well, just appreciate their story about their experience, you know.
Yeah, I suppose you learn
It
something
doesn't.
new as opposed to.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't see that as a significant identifier or driver of our relationship. The
Okay.
driver is the fact that we are so compatible.
Okay.
But
And
the compatibility is values.
in the next kind of vein, what about cultural differences, which you kind of just touched on? You've not
Yeah.
talked about a problem. What about emotional needs? Have you found that they're different when there's different ages, or?
Interesting one. Emotional needs.
Because I suppose they're different anywhere between men and women.
Yeah.
It's quite clear that women we mature quicker than men anyway.
Yeah.
Although that can be an assumption, because some men do mature quicker, but you know what I mean. But
Yes.
do you find the emotional needs different?
I think what I would recognize is that my partner is, it's hard to say. I mean, in a way he's really mature, but in a way he acts like a kid at times. So, you know, in terms of attitude and emotional needs, I just think we're human beings at the end of the day, and I don't think the age thing is really a factor. I'm trying to think if there are any scenarios or circumstances where it would be obvious.
Maybe, but I'm not going to say it's an emotional need, but you see what I mean by that. What about, for instance, marriage? Because he may have done it before and be done with it, but maybe that's something that you would have wanted. If it's not quite an emotional need, but it could be a need. You know what I mean? Is that something that, you know, has presented itself? Is that something that you see as a?
Oh yeah, and yeah, that's true. And I guess that's down to experiences, isn't it? Different experiences. Because for me, I haven't been married before, and he has. So, and yeah, I think that definitely. For me, I'd like to get married. So, but this is the key thing. I would like to get married, and for him, I think he's slightly reticent about getting married.
Yeah.
I think part of it is because our relationship works really well as it is, and so why change it?
Yeah.
And yeah, because he had one marriage that didn't work out.
Yeah.
I haven't had that experience. I would like to be married, but at the same time, I'm really strong in myself. I've got high self-esteem, and I don't believe that I need to be married to meet any kind of need in myself.
No, I know what you mean.
Yeah, and I think also, I'm the kind of person that if somebody is not all in with something, it's the same as what we said about having a child. If they're not all in, I'm not interested.
Yeah, and I think that's where you need to. It's a typical one when you would need to compromise. You know.
Yeah.
Because if it's I'm not going to say a deal breaker, but you know what I mean.
I think you respect the other person's position,
Yeah.
don't you? And where they're coming from.
But
But I think where it gets messy and complicated, and where you then get kind of an imbalance in a relationship, is when one person actually like really wants something to the exclusion of the other person's needs or desires. Yeah, exactly. So I do think that while on a conscious level I might think, well, I actually would like to be married, and I'd like to be married to him, at the same time I'm more than happy if it if that's I would be with him regardless. It's not a deciding factor as to whether we're together or not.
Fair enough. And what about health and energy levels? Now, health, obviously, at whatever age you can have issues anyway, but you're more likely to start having problems past 40, shall we say. And obviously energy levels, same thing. When you're 20, you can go clubbing till 4 o'clock in the morning and get up at 8 the next day, you're fine. And I certainly think that I couldn't do that anymore. And I'm not but you know what I mean? So have you found in the health and energy levels differences and stuff that you've had to adapt or adjust to?
Yes. I do have something to say about that, certainly. Okay. I think when I was younger, I had ME, and my energy levels were genuinely affected by an illness. And actually what I found was that when we met, our energy levels were, mine were definitely worse than his.
Okay.
So that's just an interesting sort of thing, because it kind of turns it on its head in our relationship. But I have noticed, certainly, during the course of our relationship, I have found that his energy levels are a bit different now. So I'm better for a start. I'm much better, and I'm getting fitter, and I've actually got a good exercise routine, and I now feel like pretty good, actually. And what I'm finding is that he is getting very tired after work, and he's got a very traditional 9-to-5 job, so our working patterns are totally different anyway. But where we're spending time together, in the evenings or weekends, I am finding that he's more tired. And it is noticeable, and I'm noticing that he would not be embarking on, at the moment, a new exercise regime like I am. So I suppose that is a difference, and I think also there is a bit of a mindset behind that as well, because I don't really, there are plenty of examples of people who are exercising like well into their 80s and 90s, and there are people running marathons, and they're in their 80s and 90s.
There's also people like my mother, which I know is unrelated, but my mother seems to have that mindset that I'm the age that I am, so I need to rest. And I'm like, no, you don't. You can rest if you're tired.
It is a mindset to a degree, yes, and that does vary between people. It is a choice as well, but again, you're with the partner you're with, and they're going to live their life, and you either respect that or you try and change them, which is a disaster. So I live my life, he lives his, and I would say, being real about it, that I have noticed a difference in energy levels now, and so that's something that we'll accommodate to.
Fair enough. So I was just thinking out loud here, because I was someone who was 13 years older than me a few years ago. And it's interesting because actually I had this conversation with him just 2 days ago, where I said that I felt that his energy levels at the time didn't necessarily match mine. And I explained a particular circumstance where I felt that he probably had tired out quicker than I had. And actually, we had this conversation then, because it was completely nothing to do with price of cheese. So also maybe assume that it is that when it isn't.
Yes, that's a very good point, because obviously, because the other thing is that that there can be some underlying emotional need that's not being met. Maybe the person is actually hiding something that they're not telling you about, and that's causing causing some stress, or it might be that there's actually an underlying illness that's undiagnosed. So yeah, it's dangerous to make those kind of assumptions, I think. So that's a really good point.
Yeah. And in terms of like people's perception and reactions when you got together and now, and social circles, do you find that people looked at you weird because he was older than you, or do you think that was irrelevant? Do you find that your social circles, you've got one, he's got one, and you've got one in the middle? How does it all pan out?
What's interesting is that if I think of most of my friends, not so much the friends that I have online, but my friends in-person friends, most of them are older than me. Most of them are in their 50s actually. And that's not just like, I didn't go out of my way to meet somebody that was older than me. I just met him. It's exactly the same with my friends. I didn't go out of my way to meet friends who are 10 to 15 years older than me. It's just who I naturally resonated with. Again, age not an issue, just shared values and shared interests and things like that.
It's an interesting point, because I also somehow seem to have friends and whoever boyfriend that have been older than me.
Yeah.
I guess some people have got maybe a more mature head on them than others. And by mature, I don't mean that, it's just that we like different things. And yeah, it's exactly the same. I am definitely attracted to older people without consciously thinking about it.
Yeah. And I think I'd probably say the same for myself, except that I do have friends of all different ages. I guess it's just not an issue. But in terms of, because you asked me about people's perceptions and stuff like that, I was lucky in that, or I am lucky in that I've never really been aware of it. The only times when I have been aware of it, I suppose it's from people that are quite judgmental anyway. So I did have it a little bit at one point. What was quite interesting was, at one point, I know there was somebody that was kind of like, I think a bit judgmental about our relationship, and I found out through a mutual friend that she'd said something like, well, I have to admit, when I see them together, they do look like a couple. And I was like, well, that just shows you, because what she was seeing, even though she was sitting in judgment, I guess, on our relationship, almost as if, well, that shouldn't be the case, those two people should not be together, or those two people should not have that relationship. And yet she could see we should.
As well as judgment on that one, because I've seen a couple of programs on, big age differences and stuff. So it depends how young or old you both look too. Because I recall one particular program where, despite all the efforts that the lady was doing in exercising and having her hair done and this and the other, she didn't have very good skin, so she's quite wrinkly, and her hair, she'd lost quite a bit, really, even for her age. So she naturally just looked older anyway. So despite everything she was doing, you could see a difference, maybe more marked than if it'd been someone exactly the same age, but they looked different, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think I just keep coming back to, do I actually really care what anybody else thinks about our relationship? But then it does,
it does, and it does, because in this particular program, what these people wanted was maybe acceptance from the family, not from someone in the supermarket, as it were. And I can understand why maybe family members, if I remember rightly, I think there was a girl who was 23 and the chap was like 50, or something along those lines. And then there was a chap who was about 28, and the lady in question I'm thinking of was about 78. So, we're talking a double of an age difference. And I can understand, I suppose, why the parents would be worried of a mentoring and a relationship where, you know, it's very different. Their life is not going to be inverted brackets normal, whether that is. But I can also understand how, you know, the protection side of a parent would be, I'm worried about that.
I think one of the important aspects of that, though, is that when you're in a relationship, you know all of the things that bond you. You know all of the reasons you're together. You're in it. You understand it. You have shared experiences. Anybody from the outside looking in is only going to see it from their perspective.
Completely.
And people who don't know about how your relationship works and who haven't actually seen your relationship in action and seen, you know, maybe how you interact with one another and things like that. And I think I think that can grow, and I think people can start to understand and start to see more. So I would say, if that is you and you're in that position, you know, just be open with people as much as possible, and be understanding and respectful of their position, because they can get very fixated on one aspect, and the one aspect may be the age gap. The one aspect might be, you know, as you say, like a parent being protective, thinking, oh, you know, my son or daughter is going to end up, you know, on their own at a time in their life when it'd be difficult to meet people, and, you know, but that's all perceptions. It's all their perspective, and none of it is reality. So who says, like, say for me, in my example, say for example, I'm, you know, 65 and I live till I'm 85, and for 20 years, I'm not with him.
Yeah.
So, but who's to say that it's going to be difficult for me to meet someone?
Yeah, completely.
I might meet the perfect person, or I might be perfectly happy on my own.
Completely.
But it, you know, for me, it's my life. It's for me to deal with at the time, if and when it happens, like whatever it is, it's for me to deal with. And so I can kind of understand a parent looking in and being worried about that.
And I think with that as well,
but I'm not.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. The first one is obviously people like people who conform. So if you're going to be like, you know, not in that bracket, so to speak, they might get a little bit, and then actually just take time for them to,
exactly.
you know, get round to the idea, basically. But I think going back to the thing about parents and being worried about their kids, I think there's also a very selfish element where, for instance, if there's a massive, great, big age gap, there may not be grandkids. And some parents may have an issue with that because it's something they wanted.
Yes, exactly. And I'm lucky that I don't have that so much, although it is mentioned, and I still get asked. I still get comments like, you know, you really should think about freezing some eggs. You know, have you thought about that?
Have you thought about that? I know this is about the subject, but because for those of you who don't know me, impending hysterectomy because of various the number of times I've heard that in the last 6 months, it's actually winding me up.
Honestly, I'm hearing it more and more, interestingly, and I guess maybe it's because, you know, the women that I work with and like what their like main focus is, but there just seems to be this obsession with asking people about freezing their eggs.
I know. And actually, talking of this, I was chatting to someone who had difficulties having a child with his wife, and he said, actually, to be fair, your eggs at 40, you should really have done it at 20 because the quality is not that good. And I'm thinking, and that's the quality of my eggs. But I also get, you know, what he was saying. Anyway, moving on.
But it's extraordinary that other people have opinions about these things, isn't it? And then share them with you. It's like, hold on a second.
I know.
That just crosses the line.
I know, they're my ones. So, do you sometimes find him set in his ways because of the age? Or, I mean, I know that we all set in our ways, but obviously.
Oh, yeah, me too. Yeah. I think I'm yet to see that.
Okay, that's fair enough.
I think sometimes the set in your ways thing is more of a personality thing.
Yeah,
I think. I think some people are more prone to being like that and others not. So I'm not sure that age is the determining factor of that.
Okay.
But obviously, you know, anything, as you know, because you work in this world of and so you'll know that any kind of behavior can become habitual, and it does. It's just natural that so I suppose what becomes a habit, you know, is it a 20-year habit or a 40-year habit, and perhaps it just becomes more ingrained.
I think it's not just that. As we age, we like change less and less and less and less, because change is not safe. So that's what is probably a contributing factor. And I've got, I'm not going to say controversial questions, but obviously you met him and the age difference was kind of irrelevant because it just kind of happened. But certain women, we go out of their way to choose an older man. That's what you've got websites like sugardaddy.com.
Yeah.
What do you think that is?
Good question. Well, I think, I suppose...
No, we're not going down the gold digger route, you know, of a 20-year-old marrying an 85, where you can always kind of question the motives. But some people will generally go out of their way for an older man, and not because they want something out of him, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
So just naturally gravitating towards being attracted to older men.
Would you say it's because of a father figure, or what do you think?
It's a really good question. I'm not attracted. The thing is, if I try and answer from my experience, well, my experience is that I haven't actually been attracted to many men in my life. So, but if I think about the men that I've been attracted to, they've been all different ages. So I can't.
It's not.
So it's hard for me to answer from my experience. I would say though that you know, we discussed before about the fact that we both tend to have friends that are older than we are. I don't know if it's relevant, but I had a period in my childhood where I grew up very quickly and took on adult responsibilities as a child.
Yeah, and that's probably a very fair point.
I wondered.
I'm an only child, and same thing, both parents were working, so I had to take some responsibilities. But also because of being an only child and various other things, I think I probably spent an awful lot of time with adults. So I'm probably naturally drawn to people who are a little bit older anyway, as I said, whether as friends or whatever. Yeah. But I guess also people that, to me, are more mature in their heads. I think that, for me, that's quite an important...
I think that you've really touched on something there, I think, because... and I think this isn't about age, it is about personality. But I think from my point of view, I love having deep conversations. And that's just part of who I am. I actually really love getting under the surface of, you know, our psychology and why we do things and why we think certain things. And I'm not really interested in kind of like superficial conversations, even, you know, things like, at a party, you know, my worst nightmare is just the chit chat. I just find it so inane. And I suppose possibly the more experience people have, you know, potentially the more depth, the more stories, the more depth, the more kind of wisdom and understanding. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but you do get wiser as you get older, and not just as you get older, as you have more experiences. So you can be a young head, you know, you can actually be an old head on young shoulders easily. And I would say that about myself, and in fact people said it about me even when I was sort of in my teens and 20s, that, you know, that I was just different. And so then I do think there is something in that, actually.
Weird, because the reason why I've thought of it is because I am told that regularly. So same thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we need to start to, like, you know, wrap up, but I wanted to ask you one last question, which is, if someone, you know, was starting to fall for someone who was older and was a bit unsure, what would you say to them?
Just trust your instinct, trust your gut, because I think you can always talk yourself out of something. I think if you I think the thing to remember is that you're the person that lives your life, that no one else is going to live that life for you. And also anybody looking in and giving you advice, or, you know, worrying about what other people might think about you, or, you know, what you should do, and, you know, all these shoulds that come out. And I think that person does not have to live your life. And for me, I know one of the things that my dad said to me, and it stuck with me, is that you'll know when you've met the right person.
Yeah.
Because you cannot be without them.
Yeah, and I agree with that.
And that has been true. And for me, it's either I absolutely can't be without them, or it's not going to happen. And I guess that's why I've had hardly any relationships in my life, because most people don't tick that box. Most people just aren't that, I don't have that reaction to.
Yeah.
So yeah. But I would say, if you feel that about somebody, like, allow yourself to just go with it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Well, thank you so much for your time.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. And so that's it for today. Thanks again for listening. If you've enjoyed it, from age gap to freezing eggs, then please subscribe to the channel and leave us a review, and more importantly, come back next week. Thank you. Bye.